Phillip Venter, thank you for joining the show. We know there's been recently several updates regarding immigration law in the UK, and you guys have released a statement pointing to the new the white papers on the UK immigration website. So what I've done is I've prepared a couple of questions based on those white papers and based on the statement that you guys set out, and I am hoping that you can possibly explain some of it and shed a bit of light on it. But before we get into it, please take a few minutes and just introduce yourself to the Oorsee community.
Yeah, good day, and hi, Stephen. Yeah, thanks for having me. My name's Phillip Venter. I'm one of the directors at Breytenbachs Immigration. Breytenbachs have been around for many, many years, helping a lot of South Africans, all people all over the world for that matter. But we've got quite a big South African base of clients. Just from our company's perspective, so we've got a firm. One of our offices is in London, and then we've got an office in Cape Town, Durban, and Pretoria. And yeah, and I'm happy to be here.
And you mainly focus on immigration to the UK from South
Uh,
Africa.
Well, yeah, basically, yeah, so our focus point is immigration to the UK. We also have a South African department helping people coming back. We obviously have some clients going over to the UK, been able to get to the indefinite leave to remain stage, and got their citizenship and married British citizens, and wish to come back and settle again in South Africa. So we've got a South African department as well, and yeah, but we assist people all over the world, but biggest client base is probably South Africans at this stage.
I was going to get to that. That's an interesting topic. South Africans going back. I want to unpack that a little bit. How many do you get per day?
I myself don't work in that department. That's Mr. Hannes Breytenbach, the founder, who runs that department with one of his colleagues, Audrey. Look, there's people coming back. I think a big thing from the UK is it's quite expensive. So people move to the UK with all their plans, and somewhere down the line they miss South Africa and they want to come and settle here with their pounds and bring their family who may have not really had the experience of living in South Africa. So yeah, so we do assist. It does pick up quite a bit. Look, I mean, there's a lot of people work permits that we actually assist with. People from all over the world that need to come and do some form of contract work here for a company or for business. So it's picking up. But yeah, not as busy as the UK.
I can imagine. Now, I used to work in the UK. So we went over for 3 years, and yeah, for the most part, I was always sort of in awe where I was because life was hard in South Africa. I worked for myself. I had a web developing business, and it was grind, 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 grind the whole time. And then, yeah, we went for a holiday back to South Africa in 2017. And I told my wife, I said, this is amazing. I mean, I was dirt poor in the UK, but I was buying steaks for everyone at dinner because I was paying in pounds. And at that stage, it was like 21 or 22 rands to the pound. It was just amazing. And then
Mm.
just a little voice in my head said, listen, remember, this is a holiday. This is vacation. Working here and staying here is a whole different ballgame. And to tell you the truth, in my industry, I don't think I would have survived COVID. I think work would have probably stood dead still and it would have been tough as nails. But considering the weather, and I know it's a cliche excuse, I do not blame any South African that gets on a plane and goes back to South Africa. Honestly, I don't. Right.
So some good points that you just to add to that. I think what quite a good thing from the UK is a lot of people can go live in the UK and work in low level jobs that they wouldn't have worked in South Africa because you just wouldn't been able to survive. And I think in the UK, paying getting paid in pounds and living in a first world country, you can really support yourself, and not really struggle. And so yeah, but generally people come back for holiday and then their minds, they forget about all the negative parts and and miss the positive parts. But you're exactly right. To try and make a living, a lot of people during COVID, it was just horrible in South Africa. So we've assisted so many after COVID, who just companies closed down, lost their jobs, and wanted to go and make a better life in the UK. So yeah, happy we could help them.
Well, I'm glad there's people like you out there that can help make the situation easier. We've used immigration wouldn't say lawyers or agents every time that we moved, because just dealing with all the paperwork is just insane. Right,
Mm.
question number one. Let's get straight into it. We
Okay.
will be doing. Look. This is not this is not me asking questions and you answering. This is a chat. So please interrupt me whenever you want. And yeah, I don't mind at all if we get off script. Like always tell my interviewees is that none of this is structured. We're just having fun. Right. So the shift in settlement rules from 5 to 10 years. Now, this is an interesting one because when we moved over to the UK, we went on a 3-year visa. Then we had to do another 3-year visa to even, I think, apply for leave to remain, which then is technically 5 years. The problem is, like you said, the UK is expensive. So for us who wanted a second baby, the UK makes it really hard for a woman to work and have children, especially if you're on a working visa and you're not getting any childcare benefits for that matter. So, I mean, a shift from 5 to 10 years, that's double. Can you please unpack that for us? So the question I actually originally prepared was how will extending the qualifying period for settlement from 5 to 10 years in certain visa categories affect current visa holders and their long-term plans?
Mm. Yeah, look, just to add to that, look, I mean, with regards to very expensive in the UK, yes, one can go across and make a living there, but you're 100% correct. Moving over to the UK, you generally don't have your family support really. Dropping off a little one at grandma, or family member to take care of them for the day or for the week, so that's quite complicated and quite expensive in the UK because you have to pay for those sort of services in the UK, up to a point where the child can actually go to school, and then you can have the benefit of government schools. So it is quite difficult, specifically for people who just had a little one. But yeah, look, to get to your question with regards to, doubling it, yeah, it's quite horrible, it's quite a mountain to climb, because a lot of people already 5 years seems so long already, and changing it to 10 years is, it's double the time. I think what people should take out of this, which is quite important, is number one, um, this change is not for all visa categories. So it's not a blanket rule for everyone.
Mm.
They in the white paper they specifically state the points-based system, so which is generally your skilled workers, and I think the effect it will have, I think the biggest effect is not just the timing of it, but it's also from a financial perspective. I mean, you go across to the UK on a work permit, you do your 3 years. So depending on the sponsorship what they give you, some companies give 5 years straight off the bat. Other companies give you up to 3 years, and then you need to extend it up to 5 years. But when you get to that 5-year mark, I mean, you already had cost, to do the actual entry clearance to move another country. Then you need to do your extension, and just as you think you start getting onto your feet financially, you're sitting with this indefinite leave to remain application, which at the moment is just over £3,000.
Yeah.
Now, when you consider this whole extension period, of 5 years. The problem you're sitting with is not just so obviously the cost involved, but um, 10 years is quite a long period of time. A lot of people want to go across, spend their time in the UK, get to indefinite leave and get their citizenship and perhaps move elsewhere. And I wonder, this is just opinion. I wonder if that's not an issue for the UK at this stage. People coming across on a skilled worker, for example, bringing across their skills, living there for 5 years, get their indefinite leave to remain, then citizenship, and then leave with their skills. So they literally go and contribute to the economy for 5 years, and then they leave. So I think I don't know if this is perhaps also a way of keeping the skills a little bit longer in the UK. But yeah, it's going to have a huge effect if this actually is changed. Um, People who currently already in the UK, I think the white paper does not really specifically stipulate that the changes will impact people who are already in the UK. But obviously, there's a lot of articles and reports that it may affect people who arrived in the UK after 2020. So I think just to try and be proactive, I think people who are currently able to apply or eligible to apply for the indefinite leave to remain needs to do that as soon as possible.
When when we started our application for Australia, I remember I was sitting in the notary's office and we were like getting all our paperwork verified or whatever that word in English is. Um, and he looked at us and he was quite sad. And he was a proper gentleman. He was one of those, I think he's met the Queen and all of those stuff. And he said he's sad today for Britain because Britain's losing two professional people that was contributing to the economy. And the reason he was sad was not because Britain's losing them, it's because Britain, didn't take care enough for us to want to stay. And because my wife works in child protection, at that stage I was an IT manager for a school, and I had to, and in no way I'm bragging or anything, but I had to go and compete for that job with 20 other British people, and they chose me, and for in their opinion for a reason because I had a skill that they needed, and because they've made it so hard for us to have Isabella and then uh, um, at the same time hold two full-time jobs and pay childcare and all of those things and getting no benefit whatsoever, like childcare benefits you get in Australia. I can't even remember if you got any in England. I think you did. It was they called it childcare vouchers or something like that. It yeah, we just couldn't afford staying. And then just the whole concept of, well, let's stick it out for another 3 years or at least 2 years to get leave to remain, and then working out the math and realizing, ooh, it's probably going to cost us around £9,000 just to get it for us as a family. I don't know how correct that is now. It just didn't compute. And for that reason, we decided to give Australia a chance. And Australia was amazing. They were just like, here's double the wages you've earned in the UK. And you know what? 2 years and you can apply for permanent residence. Easy. And as I said to you today, I'm just waiting for the phone call that's going to tell me I can go and write my citizenship exam. I mean, that's
That's
incredible.
great. Yeah.
But like I
Yeah,
said,
look,
we go off script.
yeah, and look, I mean, when you consider the whole, people going across to get another passport, how many South Africans, look, I mean, currently, if we're focusing on South Africans specifically today, but when you think of South Africans sitting in South Africa at the moment, not really knowing what the future holds here for them, wants to go and get another passport. So the UK is quite a favorable option to consider because you can go live and work there for 5 years, get your indefinite leave to remain and ultimately citizenship, and you've got your passport.
Yeah.
Changing this to 10 years is probably going to have quite a huge effect where people that's planning or intending on moving countries to get a passport can say, look, no, I'm going to take my skills, exactly what happened to you guys, and I'm going to take it elsewhere, and I think that's quite a bit of a loss if I can call it that. But yeah, it's something that we need to wait and see if this is actually going to be approved. I think something that's quite important here also, just to take note, is the fact that the white paper is currently just a proposal. There's still quite a
Right.
bit of steps that need to be taken, before they actually change the rules and regulations. But the fact that they've published this means how serious they are.
Yeah.
So we'll need to see, and hopefully it doesn't get approved or everything. But a little bit of a silver lining, if I can call it that. If they, one thing that they do mention, we obviously don't know how it's going to work. Currently, in order to qualify for a skilled worker, it's already a points base. You have to score some amount of points, but it seems like they're going to introduce another points based system that will help you bring the timeline down from 10 years to a lesser timeline. So we'll wait and see how that's gonna, what the effect
Yeah.
that's gonna have and how it's gonna work. But at least they're gonna provide something where people can contribute more or, form part of society and provide a little bit more evidence with regards to how they're settling, and hopefully that can bring it down. So I'm looking forward to see how that would work though.
What's the waiting period on this, if I may ask? But Annexed to that, I had another question, which basically is because while I was living there, I always found there was two types of people. The one that absolutely loved you and wanted to invite you to every single dinner party, and then there was the other half that was like, "What are you doing here? You're taking my job." And those, I didn't even know it existed, but they're there. It's real. How many of this is actually fueled by community and by society in Britain? And yeah, what's the waiting period to finally find out what the result's going to be?
Well, the waiting period. Look, I mean, this needs to go through Parliament, House of Lords. There's they can obviously provide the opportunity for the public to also provide confirmation or set their provide their comments, and that needs to be. And then they're going to consult with regards to this and see how whether this is actually going to be implemented. There is no exact timeline at this stage. Reports are suggesting that it's probably going to be towards next year, but it can even take longer. So we'll need to wait and see. But everybody that we speak to and things that we read up on, I think it's probably going to be towards next year.
Is it political? That's basically my question. When I raised it from community side or society, is it a political move?
I think a little bit of both. Look, I mean, again, this is just opinion. I think the UK loves South Africans. I think all over the world where you go, I think in South
Not
Africa,
during
most of us.
Not during the Anglo-Boer War. They didn't really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Look, I think well, they said they'll rather have how many farmers opposed to how many thousands. But in any case,
Yeah.
so look, the big thing with regards to when you consider South Africans, I went to the UK back in 2005. I was there on the 2-year working holiday, and you always heard people saying they love South Africans because we work, we put the type of work, the how we work. And I'll never forget while I was working at this one company, I didn't really know about tea time. You hear about these things, but
Yeah.
you don't take it. You work through it. You sit with your lunch at your computer and you work. And so I think from that perspective, a lot of companies enjoy employing South Africans. But I think from some British citizens or nationals in the UK may feel that we are taking their jobs. So there is, look, I mean, if you consider 2023, net migration is, I think it was about 160,000 people that immigrated to the UK. That's what they want to bring down. So they wanted to bring that down because that's quite a bunch of people going across, taking up employment in the UK, and what happens to the rest of the people that's living there.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's a bit of both. Um, an opinion as well. Obviously, with the elections last year, all the parties had to provide confirmation of what they're going to do, and specifically with regards to to immigration policies. And Labour confirmed that they're going to bring it down, and that's part of their bill that they said that they're going to do. And I think this is why they're trying now, whether it's going to be successful or not. If it's not successful and changes doesn't really take effect, then at least they can say that we've tried. Because they got the votes. So they have to do what they said they're going to do. So I do believe it's a bit of both, but you're 100% correct. Look, depending on where you are in the UK, people generally, it's so multicultural in the UK. I mean,
Absolutely.
I think when I was living in the UK, I lived in London, and London itself, I met more people from all over the world than British nationals. I think when
Yeah.
you go outside of London a little bit, then you start meeting the real British people. And most of them were quite friendly, and wanted more information on South Africa, and we had some good chats. But yeah, I definitely think it's a bit of both, but I think it's more political, in my opinion.
Yeah. We went way off topic, but I'm actually really enjoying this conversation because it brings back memories. I remember someone the other day actually telling me, "Oh, we love South Africans because you just love to work. We love earning foreign income. Nobody likes to work."
That is a different way to say it, right?
Uh, a funny story. I worked in the UK. My first job was for O2, all right, the cell phone network.
Okay.
I was a
Yes.
technical. They called me the O2 guru. But yeah, I had a bit of like a supervisor sort of role underneath the sales manager or something like that. But within our team was another South African who used to be a police officer in South Africa.
Yeah.
Somehow he managed to leave that job, got a visa, and he actually joined the Met Police in London. He did that for a few years. He left that job and he started working for O2 as sales. And he always talked and bragged a lot because I mean, we wouldn't with a resume like that. But I had my own separate desk, and this big British guy came to sit with me, and he just complained, looking at because it happened to be that the other South African was colored. So he just sort of complained that look at this foreigner coming into this country now doing the job that his kids could have done and everything. And then he sort of turned to me and asked me something, and I answered him, and he realized, I'm also. And then he looked around, he realized every single person in that shop was from another country. We had Nepalese, South Africans, um, Jamaican, and our manager was Portuguese. Anyway, like I said, way off topic. Let me jump to the next question. Now, changes to the skilled worker route, RQF level 6 and salary threshold increases. That's the topic. The question is, how will raising the minimum qualification and salary threshold for skilled worker visas reshape employer recruitment practices and the ability of South Africans to qualify for UK jobs? Now, we've basically touched a bit on this question in some of the previous statements, but if you want to unpack that a little bit further.
Yeah, look, I mean, so I think firstly to understand with regards to the minimum qualification, uh, pre 2020, the skilled worker was actually called a tier two general. I think that's when you guys went across. On the tier two general, it was quite difficult, but back then it was RQF level 6. That was the level of positions that was available and qualified under the permit option. Then Brexit happened. And after Brexit, they changed it. They changed the name to skilled worker, and what they did is they brought in a lot of RQF level 3 positions on that list as well. And at this stage, what they probably want to do is they want to more or less move back to that point, where you have to get a job at RQF level 6 in order to qualify, so that there's that sort of highly skilled people coming across. I mean, if I look back at the last 5 years, how many people were able to apply? I know we're going to touch on this question as well, but applied on the caring route, as a carer, and they never cared for somebody a day in their life in South Africa, but they were able to obtain training for a couple of weeks and work as a carer. So look, that is definitely one of the changes that they want to implement, which is going to make that list of approved positions a lot shorter. What's also important here to also realize, it doesn't mean that all the positions you have to have a specific qualification. A lot of people with working experience would also qualify. So when you consider somebody like who works as a project manager, for example, if they had project management, worked as a project manager for many years in South Africa, they would still be able to qualify if they get that sponsorship. So I think the list is going to change. Obviously, the list is going to change, but there's not going to be as many people that would qualify. From the salary threshold increase, I think the issue here really is, it's really going to start forcing people. Companies in London will most likely be able to employ people, but when you consider the rest of the UK, salaries are not as high in Scotland, for example, as in England. Obviously depending on what you do, but London really is where the most of the high salaries are paid. And at the moment, that income threshold moved. It increased last year, April, to 38,700 pounds per year that people need to earn. So just to give some perspective. So the UK's got the requirement stating that you've got a minimum skilled worker salary, but then you also have a salary that's attached to your specific position. And how that basically works is, let's use project management, for example. Let's say the UK confirms that your project management salary is £42,000 a year. Then you have to earn the 42,000. You can't earn the 38,700. But if project management's minimum salary is 32, then the company has to pay you the 38,700 in order for you to qualify. And I think that's something that's gonna have quite a huge effect if they start increasing those salaries. Because when you consider, the average salary for attorney in South Africa, somebody who's been acting as a attorney for the last 5 years is probably struggling to earn 38,700 pounds a year.
Yeah.
So I think this is quite a big thing, but I believe they want to try and move back to the old way of doing it, in order to try and bring net migration down more than what it is now, and also to make sure that the correct skills are coming in. Something that they do mention though is they're going to implement it's like a temporary shortage list where they're going to have some RQF level 3 positions available. So it will still, give the opportunity for some lower positions to qualify. But the word temporary is what's bugging me at this stage.
Yeah, it's gonna be a watered down version of a visa. Yeah, I can just imagine. I think they got something similar in Australia as well. They've got something for like fruit pickers that wants to come over just to come pick fruit for a season or something. I'm not 100% sure. Speaking under correction, but you've touched on social care visas, and that was indeed my next question: is what does the closure of international social care visa route mean for South African health and care workers seeking UK opportunities?
Look, so what they basically want to do is this is really limited to care workers, or our understanding is specifically care workers. We do believe that other healthcare professions like your nurses and your doctors would most likely still be able to qualify. We would obviously need to wait for the list to be published before we can comment really further. But the big thing for the healthcare workers, or the basic care, your care workers, is that because, and this is again just opinion, because you don't really need that much expertise in order to work as a carer in the UK. I think the UK wants to try and force caring agencies to try and look for locals to try and fill those roles because they can provide that training, and in order to try and avoid unemployment rates picking up. So I think because there's obviously you've got your different levels of carers. You've got carers that that's quite highly skilled, and unfortunately they don't really provide a difference between the two. It's just care workers. So that is quite a huge thing. But in all honesty, we've seen since last year. Look, in April last year, in 2024, they already brought in some changes with the healthcare. Or carers specifically stating that care workers are not allowed to bring their family across. So if you applied for a care workers visa after April 2024, you weren't allowed to bring family members as your dependents. You had to go live and work in the UK for 5 years. And then once you get your indefinite leave to remain, you'll then be able to bring your family across. And I think this is also that touch on that first question, whether they're going to force people currently in the UK already on work permits to also do the whole 10-year. I mean, if that happens, then you're sitting with care workers who arrived in the UK and they need to try and spend 10 years in the UK before they can bring their family members across. So
Ooh.
we doubt that that's going to be the case. Look, they did state that carers who's currently in the UK would be able to extend their visas and will be able to get to the indefinite leave to remain stage, but they are most likely going to take that off, and that's probably one of the things that we think is definitely going to happen.
Wow. Well, that is valuable information. Thank you so much. Now, I am aware that we've gone slightly over time, but I've got two more questions. How are you?
Yeah,
Fine.
please.
Well,
Yep, no, I'm perfectly fine.
my last question is going to be about the English language test, but let's touch based on student and graduate visa tightening. So, how will shortening graduate visas and introducing financial penalties affect the feasibility of studying in the UK for international students? Because I personally know people that went over on a study visa. I don't know, I can't remember for sure, but I think the rule was you go and study your time, you go back to South Africa, and then you need to reapply or I can't, yeah, you're the professional, so you enlighten us.
So I'm going to give you a bit of a long answer and an explanation here. So, look, I think something that's quite important from a student visa perspective is, look, I mean, people tend to go across on student visas. I consult a lot with people who don't meet the requirements for the skilled worker immediately, or they're struggling to obtain that sponsorship, but they're willing to go and study. And that study permit is really a stepping stone. Obviously, a lot of people get out of school and they want to go and study and get their qualification in the UK, but others want to further their studies and get a stepping stone into the UK. And how it currently works is when you move across on your student visa, the time you spent in the UK as a student does not lead to indefinite leave to remain already. That's been like that for many years. But people will then go across, they will study, they will graduate, and then they would try and obtain sponsorship in order to remain in the UK and to get their time, their clock ticking in order to get to the indefinite leave to remain stage. Now, I think it's about 2 years ago, the UK then introduced this graduate visa. So this is something, it's two different visas. The graduate visa is a temporary 2-year work permit. So my opinion is that the UK, they believe that people come across, they study for their bachelor's degree or whatever degree they're getting, but then they don't have enough time to secure that sponsorship. And then they take whatever they've been taught in the UK, and they go to another country because there's just not enough time. Because as soon as they overstay, obviously, it's got big implications with future visa applications. So they leave and look for work elsewhere. So the UK then introduced this graduate visa, which is specifically for people who study at RQF level 6 or higher. So it has to be a degree level or higher. So it's still, even though you automatically qualify for this, you got right to apply for it. You still need to apply and meet certain requirements, of course. And then once your graduate visa is approved, you then have this 2 years to live and work in the UK and try and secure sponsorship. Now, I don't think the reducing that from 2 years. So if we're on the graduate visa quickly, so reducing it from 24 months to 18 months is not quite I don't think that's too harsh. I think what the UK government wants, the thinking behind it, again, this is just my opinion, is they want to try and force people who graduate to try and secure sponsorship as soon as possible, not just take the 2 years like a 2 year working holiday, and actually try and obtain that sponsorship so that they can start contributing towards the economy. So I think that's so that change isn't that bad. Look, bear in mind, before we knew the white paper was coming, but then a lot of talk, and reports that was published is that they may abolish the graduate visa completely. So we are actually extremely happy that they didn't, because that obviously gives an opportunity for somebody who went and studied to actually be changed into that graduate visa so that they can obviously get their sponsorship. With regards to the penalties that you are referring to, look, so there's still a lot of information that still needs to be made available. But the thinking is that when you consider a skilled workers visa, okay, if a company sponsors an employee, they generally need to pay Home Office a skill levy fee. Depending on the size of the company, will depend on the amount they need to pay. So, and they pay per year for the length this person's going to be working there. So I think what they want to try and do is they want to implement it into the universities and say, look, I mean, I can be completely wrong on this, but this is the thinking, is that pay the skill levy fee. So it's a levy that would need to be paid for the length of time the student's going to study there. So it's not really going to have an effect immediately or directly on that student immediately, but the university will then need to pay that fee, and that fees that's being paid is then going to be reinvested into skills and training and education and higher education. What will be an issue is it's already so expensive to go and study in the UK that universities may increase their fees, for international students. And that means that people wanting to go and study would need to they're already paying a huge amount to go and study. They will now just need to pay, most likely need to pay more. So yeah, so that's at this stage the thinking.
Yeah, it makes you wonder because I know people that's actually taken the gap year and they've done nothing, like just chill home, and then they go to the UK after that first year, after helping out on the farm and all of that to go and study. If they still will be doing that, because the risk is seemingly higher than it was, well, what it is now currently, if, like you said, this white paper is approved. Philip, thank you so much. I'm gonna get to our last question, and then after that, I've got a positive note. I would like to finish it off on a positive note because, like I said, I used to live in the UK and I actually liked it. But let's talk about the English language. Right. So
Yes.
let me tell you a story. And I've told the story before, and I might sound like I'm an awful person for telling this story, but I felt it. So when we planned to go to the UK, we had to do all this preparation. We had to meet all this prerequisites, and one of which is you need to go write an IELTS test. I was very proud because I beat my wife by zero point 0.5 points, and she was the visa she was the ticket in. I was a dependent, but for me who got zero point 0.5 points, zero point 0.5 points more than she did was quite important to me. And then close to the time before we actually moved to Australia, I went down to we lived in Aldershot, right in Hampshire, right on the border between Aldershot and Guildford, because I worked in Guildford at the time. I went down to this little pizza shop to go buy a pizza for the family, and I
Mm,
was standing there for 10 minutes trying to explain to this lady across the counter who couldn't understand a word of English what I wanted on my pizza. Then finally, a son arrived from a delivery or wherever he was. He came in and he took the order and it was all okay.
mm,
But I walked away there and I was upset. I was angry because I paid a lot of money in order to get my IELTS test and I had to go and study to pass it to enter the UK, where our dear pizza lady could just
mm,
jump on a ferry, come across and enter the UK with little to no paperwork. And this was before Brexit, like literally just before. Well, I think it was like a year before or so. And I was upset. I was upset about it. Now,
mm.
it seems finally they're realizing this. I don't know if it's going to be for European countries as well. Like I said, I'm not clued up with immigration rules at all. But that's why we've got you here. So, what challenges will South African applicants face with the new English language thresholds? B2 for workers and A1 for dependents. Can you please unpack the B2 and A1 as well for those people out there that hasn't actually read the white paper that don't know what it means?
Look, so I think from a work permit perspective, it may be a little bit more difficult. Look, I think it's very important to understand different visas require different levels of English language, and you get your A1 level, which is your speaking and listening only. So you guys obviously you did the speaking, listening, reading, and writing, but you've got your A1. A2 and your B1, which all of those are speaking and listening. And your A1, you generally complete when you apply as a spouse or family member on a British passport holder. And that's a minimum level that you need to pass in order to get into the UK. When it comes to your further leave to remain, so your extension application, you need to do the A2. And then when you get to indefinite leave to remain, you need to do your B1. Now, I'd advise all my clients to do the B1 immediately anyway. So the B1 speaking and listening is really not that difficult. I think South Africans don't really struggle with that. Look, I mean, the majority of South Africans speak English anyway, even though we've got, what, 12 official languages. And that's one of the reasons why South Africans have to do this English test, is because English is not our first, it's not first on the list of languages or the only language, a majority of English speaking country. So a lot of our clients already do the B1 and they pass it. I've been doing immigration working at Breytenbachs since 2007, and I've never had anyone fail the test. Look, back then you didn't have to do the English language test. I think it was only 2013, but for spouses and family members on British passport holders. But so I don't think that's going to have a huge effect. So I think people out there can really relax with regards to that. It's not a difficult exam. It's something they can prep for, and it's really just speaking and listening. So I think from that perspective, it's fine. Look, I mean, our South Africans would be able to do it. They are looking at, increasing the level of English for work permit holders, though,
Mm.
and that's a test that you did, and like you said, it's quite daunting, specifically for people who did their last exam, 15, 20 years ago, and need to go and do another exam, and the format of the test is a little bit different than the tests that you are used to. So, look. Luckily, with all these testing centers, look, I mean, there's now, look, the IELTS test has always been there, and you've got Pearson's PTE, and you've got English language certificate. So you've got these couple of testing centers specifically in South Africa. Obviously, every country will have testing centers and companies that assist. But generally, when you do the booking and you pay, you get study material, so you can prep for it. So I really think it should be okay. I don't think the English language requirement, increasing the levels is going to have such a huge effect on people not being able to go. And remember, if you fail, you just redo it, but you pay again. So
Yeah.
that's probably the concern. But yeah, look, I mean, bringing in the high level of test, I think from family members on British passport holders, it's going to be easy peasy.
Um, when I did the English test to move from South Africa to the UK, and I got a crazy good score, like 9.5 out of 10. So, some like wow, it's actually quite good. And then I moved from the UK to Australia. Guess what? They make you do IELTS again. I mean, I'm already
Yeah.
in the UK, but I don't know. So I did it, but I got 8.5 this time. And I was like, okay, something's obviously changed. Then I moved from, yeah, so then we had to apply for permanent residence in Australia while already working here. And they made me write the test again. I'm like,
Hmm.
did I forget to speak English or what's going on? But I got 7.5 out of 10. So I've come to this conclusion. Australia is horrible for the English language. The longer you live here, the worse you speak it.
Hmm.
To make matters even more worse, they've now bringing in this new rule in Australia where immigrants are going to have to rewrite a learner's test or redo their
Oh
license.
no.
If I need to do my license test today, I will fail. And so will
Yeah, but that's
70%.
probably that's probably the reason they're bringing it in, you know.
Well,
It's
no,
yeah.
in my opinion, 70% of Australians will fail the test if you make and do them if they have to do it again. Absolutely, because I've seen them drive. It's it's scary.
Yeah, it's
Honestly.
quite funny. Me and my wife over the weekend were driving, and exactly what you're saying. I said, "Remember when we had to do the 3-point check, you know?" And yeah, nobody does that. And I said, "Let's try," you know. And it takes forever, you know. I think it is. It's going to be quite tough if you have to go and redo it, you know, and learning, try and get rid of all your habits of driving, you know. But
Yeah,
an important point there that you've made with regards to the English test quickly is, and I think this is something that that's it's quite a good point that I think that needs to be made is when depending to which country you go, you have to do a specific test for that country. Even though it's IELTS, the IELTS test, if you do, I've got a lot of clients, I consult with them and they say, but they were looking into Australia and they already completed the IELTS test.
mm,
And but you have to then specifically do the one for the UK. A lot of people don't know that, and then they apply for their visas without knowing with the Australian version, and they get refused based on that. So
what?
it's very important. Even if you think you've done a higher level, so let's say you need to do the B1, but you've done a B2 IELTS test.
Mm.
If you've done one for Australia, you can't use that in your UK visa application. So it's just something that I think is it's quite a good point to make, just for those out there who who's looking at moving to the UK from Australia, for example. Perhaps contact us and get advice, but there's little things like that that can cause an application to be refused.
Absolutely. Wow. Now that is something I did not know. And for anyone out there that's watching this video, I know for a lot of people is gonna, I think statistically about 20 or 30% actually watch us straight to the end. So I'll make sure I'll put your details in there because obviously there's a lot of questions that people are going to want to ask. Now, I'm not a big I don't like discussing politics, but there is a lot happening in the world of politics, especially in the USA. How much of that pressure is the UK feeling? And is there any motivation behind all of that that's sort of making them poking at the immigration laws that they currently hold?
Look, if any politics in America obviously touches the whole world. It's got an impact on the whole world. I think with regards to this white paper, I don't really think that. Look, I mean, this white paper was something coming, before everything that's started to happen in America. But yeah, surely, look, I mean, everything there's, like I say, there's always an impact, and I generally like to say no comment, you know, um, uh,
Yeah.
but. Uh, but yeah, look, I mean, with regards to these changes that's coming, this is from the UK. This has been coming for a long time. If you look at how many people immigrated to the UK over the last 5 years, it was a lot. And I think one of the big factors were the Russia-Ukraine war. A lot of Ukrainians moving to the UK. Where the UK tried to help those, to get out of the Ukraine. So I think there was a lot of people moving, and since then they started realizing they need to try and bring net migration down. And but yeah, surely, politics, the US politics, affects everyone at this stage.
Mm. Philip, Peter. It's an inside joke.
Steven,
You guys don't know a
get
thing.
fun.
It's Philip. You've been wonderful in terms of the information you've been giving us and helping us unpack this topic. I love the UK. I honestly do. I've lived there for 3 years, and I'm 41 years old now, and I grew up with stories about Robin Hood and those sorts of things. And being in that whole area where history was made, where the Braveheart and the wars and all of those things happened, for me, that romance and everything is what I've experienced when I lived there. I absolutely loved it. And we lived across Caesar's Camp, which is a massive nature
Mm.
reserve. And my son and I used to go and walk there often. And I loved it. And the cold didn't bother me anyway, if I have to quote. But I knew it wasn't the ideal place to raise small children if you want them to have an full outdoors experience. And when we got the opportunity, we got out. But I honestly want everyone whose dream it is to experience what I felt when I was there to at least have a go at it. So I am hoping that these changes will not prohibit or limit those people from experiencing their dreams, if especially those that already has applications pending and they're stressed out and they're waiting and they don't want that refusal letter because it costs so much money. And I mean, all of it from step one down to the last step of immigration, nothing of it is free, nothing. And my biggest fear
Mm.
in all the countries that I've moved to was always like, what if we fail? Is there any outgoing thoughts you want to just share with the Oorsee community? And then, yeah, we'll end it off for the evening because I think we've been talking for almost an hour. It's great.
Yeah, it's just about. Yeah, look, I mean, I think, to try and avoid refusals, obviously get expert advice, it's little things that can make quite a big difference that some people miss, and look, I mean, I know all of our lawyers and consultants here at Breytenbachs, we've got years and years of experience, and we go through it all with our clients, and so yeah, so I definitely think if those who are considering moving to the UK, come and get the expert advice. And then just to add, yeah, the UK was amazing. Look, I think the biggest thing that I will never forget is when I arrived in the UK, the silly term of your eyes opens up to the world, being able to quickly hop across on a ferry and then you're in another country, or take the Eurostar quickly to Paris, and enjoying Europe, it's so easy. And if you quickly need to get on a flight back to SA, you hop on a flight in the morning and then at night in the evening you're back home, so I think it's a lovely country, and it's a lot of things happening, and I think specifically the rugby lovers, with the URC, it's quite a fun place. But yes, get expert advice. Be careful for people out there, giving comments on how to do things. Rules and requirements change regularly, and also the way caseworkers, exercise their discretion when making decisions. All of those things are quite important. So get expert advice and feel free to contact us at Breytenbachs.
There you have it. Breytenbachs, thank you so much. Philip, we really appreciate all you guys are doing. And thank you from the Oorsee community of all those thousands of people that you've helped. We've got several thousand people on the app. We've got tens of thousands of people on our Facebook group, 30,000 of which lives in the UK. And I know each and every one of them will be true. Well, there'll be a whole stack of them that went through your offices to get there. Have a great rest of the day. What time is it there now?
It's 2:30 in the afternoon.
Right, grab some lunch and take the rest of the day off, will you?
Too many people needing to go quite
Yeah,
soon.
yeah.
So, but thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Stephen.
Cheers.